Hi, everyone. Here we are for Poop Camp. Pull up a stool and have a listen to my colleague and I, Vanessa Bond, certified nutrition practitioner, and really a specialist when it comes to digestive health and autoimmune health. So we'll talk a little bit further about that. I'm Dr. Tara Campbell, naturopathic doctor, and this is a really important topic, and it was really great to see the interest come through. So we had over 100 participants registered, and so we are happy to share this recording with you. I've been a naturopathic doctor for 11 years now, with the same passion and vigor as when I first graduated, also now with more clinical insights and experience under my belt. Higher Health is really my first baby, and it has truly been amazing to guide the ship and to grow both professionally and personally throughout, and to experience the evolution over time. Throughout that time, we've had some incredible practitioners who have graced the healing house, I like to call it, and the energy and journeys of every single client has just been amazing. So one such practitioner who has really made an impact here is Vanessa Bond, who's joined us. And I'm fortunate to have met Vanessa serendipitously. Our paths crossed a way back when I first graduated. And Vanessa, sorry, my screen has gone off. There we are. So Vanessa's going to share a bit of her personal family story, which is, I just think it's really important for everybody to know. And before we do that, I wanted to share some background about Vanessa. So she is an autoimmune, an AIP certified coach. She works closely with naturopathic doctors to provide advanced nutrition care. She has a diploma in applied holistic nutrition with certificates in endocrinology and nutrition, fat loss and blood sugar balancing, energy medicine, and lifestyle analysis. Vanessa is truly a wealth of nutrient knowledge, purpose and passion driven, poop driven maybe. She has a ton of personal experience in using nutrition to overcome health issues, and she really lives and breathes what she speaks about. So Vanessa, can you share a little bit of your story relating to Poop Camp and digestive health?
Well, sure. First of all, thank you for the lovely introduction. Yeah, we've known each other a long time. Tara treated my son when you were first filling in on maternity leave, like when you were just getting started. So it's been such a nice journey. I became interested in holistic nutrition. Actually, I won't even explain that. That's a long time ago, but I've been in practice for 8 years. And during that time, helped a lot of different situations, different people. But then my daughter in 2018 was diagnosed with a rare pediatric bone disease. It's autoinflammatory, so it falls under that autoimmune spectrum. And digestive health, working on her immune system, obviously became a very top priority for me. And today she's doing, 2 years later, she's 13, and she's doing amazing. She's thriving well with a very dire diagnosis, and she's managing it naturally. We spend a lot of time on gut health with her, and as a result, I spend a lot of time with my clients talking about their gut health, because it really is the gateway to your hormones, to your neurological system, to your nervous system, to your hormonal system, to your bones, like everywhere, and it is often a subject that people avoid. So we're going to dive deep today and help you, get the scoop on your poop. Oh.
I love it. There's so many poop puns, and I've been texting Vanessa as a pun comes up, and it's endless, and we're going to have a blast in this conversation. And also, Vanessa, I wanted to say, I love how you shared with me that the practitioners, conventional medicine practitioners who you've seen for your daughter, have really been astounded at her results, and just asking you about your expertise in that, and how she's doing so well.
Yeah, and it's been amazing. Thankfully, we have a rheumatologist who's very open-minded, and he just says, bring me the GI map test, bring me this blood work, and he's like, what are you doing? I took him a file one time this big of, here's the information you need to know, and he was grateful, and he's like, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and I get shivers or goosebumps because it's just such a healing journey together, you and your daughter and your family, and this really is it's common in ways, and where the recommendations and the things we go through benefit everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to share our top 5 tips that you can implement right away, and well, we'll just jump right in. So, oh, I'm trying to move my slide. How do I do this now? There we go. Okay, so tip number 1 in our 5 is understanding optimal digestion. And so, Vanessa, can you guide us through the digestive tract?
Okay, this is a lesson that I actually walk all of my clients through, probably at our initial intake, so they understand how everything's connected together. So digestion actually begins, well, through sight and through smell, seeing the food that you're about to eat, that can trigger the salivary enzymes. And then the functional digestion begins by the act of chewing. And each step as I go through, you'll see triggers a response in the next step. So it truly is, it's like a domino effect. It is a really delicate balance, and you need to pay attention to each step along the way. So digestion begins by the act of chewing. And when you chew your food, when you slow down and chew your food to the consistency of peanut butter, you're doing a couple things. First, you're increasing the surface matter of the food that you're eating, which means that the rest of your body down the line is not going to have to work as hard to get to your fats, your carbohydrates, your protein. And then on top of that, a lot of people don't realize that 70% of carbohydrates are actually digested in your mouth by your saliva, the salivary amylase. But the act of chewing and the saliva also moistens the food so that you can swallow easier, right? So it passes through the esophagus easily. And then this food, it enters your stomach, and that's where the bulk of protein is broken down. And so there's a few things that happen in the stomach. So the parietal cells line your stomach, and they release gastrin, which helps with motility, and they release HCl, which is hydrochloric acid, which helps break down protein, and HCl will trigger more enzymes like pepsinogen to help with protein digestion, and it will also separate B12 from protein so that it can then bind with another protein called the intrinsic factor for absorption in the small intestines. Now, low stomach acid, so not enough stomach acid, is something that's actually really common. And it's not a good thing, because what that means is you have larger protein fragments that are now going to enter the small intestine. They haven't been broken down as best as they could. And that can impact your digestion. It can contribute to the gas, bloating, and fermentation. And low stomach acid, like Tara's going to speak to this, but it's really common with chronic stress. We naturally produce less as we age. And it's also associated with diets that are high in sugars, flours, and processed foods. Okay, and so then this food, it's very acidic. It passes into your small intestines, and your small intestines are like, they're amazing. You know, they're only 20 feet long, but there's fold within fold within fold within fold. And if you were to flatten them all out, your intestines are actually the size of a tennis court, right? And so this is all to absorb that food that you started with chewing. And so when this acidic food enters your small intestines, your pancreas will release a bicarbonate solution that neutralizes that acid so you don't burn. And then it releases some additional enzymes as well. And then your gallbladder releases bile. So your gallbladder is almost like a little bucket or a catcher's mitt that catches the bile that's produced by your liver. So your liver constantly produces bile, and it just kind of drips, drips, drips. And the gallbladder catches it, and you've got a concentration of it. So when the food passes through, it flushes the intestines with bile, which helps emulsify the fats for absorption. And a lot of people who do not have a gallbladder, they have it removed, often experience constipation or diarrhea. And it really flags a need for additional bile support, because you're putting all this effort into eating well. We want to make sure that you're actually absorbing all the healthy fats that you are eating. And so then, like, I think I'm just going to be very short about this part. Like, there's different sections of the intestines that absorb different things, but for the most part, like all your vitamins, minerals, your remaining proteins, amino acids, which are proteins, fats, carbohydrates, those are all absorbed through your small intestines. And then the food will pass into your large intestines, which is also known as your colon. And here the body absorbs water and what other vitamins and minerals might be remaining. And vitamin K is also produced here. And that's really important for bone health, cardiovascular health, and blood clotting. And so, as you can see, it all starts with looking at your food and smelling your food, right? And it really is this cascade effect. And if you're missing something along the way, or one section isn't working as well as it could be, you'll have problems down the pipes.
So great.
Yeah.
And could you see my mouse going around when you were speaking, Vanessa?
Oh, I was looking at my notes.
Okay. Can you see it right now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Okay. So then the next tip, that was amazing. And really, our digestive system is pretty remarkable. I'm just trying Zoom technology.
There we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Actually, I'm going to go back up, because our tip number 2, oh, wait, okay, I did include it, is where things go awry. And so Vanessa touched on some of the key things that we will highlight further here as we go. So repetition is always good when it comes to your health. And so tip number 2, where things go awry from optimal and normal. We can see issues with salivary glands not producing enough, so dry mouth, and chewing and mechanics. It's so important. Sometimes the simplest solution really has profound effects. So chewing your food optimally. And Vanessa, I'd love at some point in this call for you to touch on smoothies, because that's a question we always get. And I won't say further, or I'll answer it.
The answer is you have to chew your smoothies.
Right.
You know, it sounds like you're supposed to be, no, you need to chew your smoothies.
Yeah.
Smoothies,
Right.
for the most part, are full of carbohydrates, 70% in the mouth.
Yeah, and really that smoothie just dumps right down in your stomach if you're not chewing it. So, and you don't get the saliva in with it to help break down those carbohydrates. So salivary glands, really important. Chewing and your mechanics of chewing is very important. Then the esophagus comes all the way down here to the esophageal sphincter, which is where we really want that working well, and we want it strong so that we keep stomach acid in the stomach. And the esophagus does not want stomach acid up here. So it's that sphincter that really protects the esophagus from the acid of the stomach coming up into the esophagus. So anybody with reflux, heartburn, it's a common concern we hear all the time. And one of our key strategies is to strengthen the sphincter and to improve stomach acidity. Actually, so anytime someone has GERD, the answer isn't always to lower stomach acid the way conventional medicine does. So we want to go with the grain. We want to support your optimal digestion, which requires high stomach acid, good stomach acid. So making sure that sphincter is working well is key. Also, Vanessa touched on low stomach acid impairing nutrient absorption of B12. So we really need that hydrochloric acid to bind with intrinsic factor so that you can absorb B12. And so oftentimes if someone is saying they have low energy, I want to ask them, do you have any digestive symptoms? And I'll look for signs of low stomach acid, because then I know they're probably B12 deficient as well. And then we have, so we've touched stomach acid, the sphincters. There's also another sphincter down here, the stomach going into the small intestine. So we want to make sure that's working well. Then here's the really cool tennis court small intestine, which is where your nutrient absorption occurs. And I love how Vanessa has broken down the parts of the small intestine for which nutrients are absorbed where. And then we go into the large intestine, which actually travels up first, across, down, and then out your rectum area. So inflammation is always important to look at. And if you have inflammation in your gut, it's just, I like to do a visual of like our stomach and the small intestines have, it's like a wave. And so when there's inflammation, that wave kind of stretches out, and then there's cracks in the hole. And so we want to make sure that that surface is tight and there's no holes and there's low inflammation. So that's always something we will look at. Digestive enzymes are so important all through, from, you know, the gallbladder and pancreas, and we could wrap stomach acid in there as well. So making sure you have the enzymes to break down food. Dehydration, so common, and that can certainly contribute to digestive issues. And oh, I have inflammation twice. That's how important it is. And then motility concerns. When there's a bacterial imbalance, we can actually disrupt our normal motility. And it's not just bacterial imbalance, there's other causes as well, which, have you ever noticed when you eat something, automatically you feel like you have to go to the bathroom? That's your motility going forward. Everything's meant to go forward. And when that brush border is disrupted, it's will get backed up, and sometimes bacteria can crawl back up rather than continuing to push things forward. So that, you know, we would dive further into that to explain it, but I'm just highlighting some areas we always touch on, or we would look to when we're assessing. Vanessa, is there anything else you would want to add to where things go awry? Okay.
No.
Number 3, let's get specific. And so I've asked Vanessa to touch on constipation and diarrhea further, and I'll touch on bloating and reflux. And so these are probably the 4 most common things we see on a daily basis. So Vanessa, tell us your insights on constipation and diarrhea.
Okay, so a lot of people say, well, what is a normal bowel movement? Well, constipation is defined as not having a bowel movement every day for more than 1 week. Okay, so I think when you look at that, you're like, wow, I think majority of the world is probably a little constipated, right? And constipated is that lack of movement, that slow motility that Tara was talking about. Now, there's different reasons why you might be constipated. There could be a structural reason, which you probably would know about by now. It could be medications, like painkillers, for example. Dehydration, that's the number 1 food thing that I look at if somebody says that they're constipated. Are you getting enough water? And then there's other things like poor liver function. Are you getting enough essential fatty acids in your diet? Are you getting enough fiber in your diet? Food sensitivities and other foods that can cause inflammation in the gut are common triggers for constipation, as is a diet that's high in sugar or refined flours. So any of your breads, cakes, crackers, bagels, muffins, those types of things. Your nervous system can also impact your bowel movement, and bacterial balances as well, which is caused by constipation, plus, you know, many of the things above that I just talked about. Now, when you're constipated, a couple of things happen. First, your food is fermenting. The bacteria is like an all-you-can-eat buffet because it's not moving out quickly, and that can contribute to gas. And, you know, smelly gas or not smelly gas. Smelly is usually an indication of protein malabsorption or protein fermentation. Not so smelly is typically associated with carbohydrates. You don't detoxify your body, right? So the chemicals, the hormones, the waste that you're trying to get rid of, there's potential for that to be reabsorbed into your system, causing even more inflammation. But your number 1 tip is look at your water and fiber first, right? Those are really quick things that you can do at home, and then move into troubleshooting from there. So diarrhea obviously is on the opposite side of the spectrum, and quite often it is related to an overactive nervous system or anxiety, bacteria or an infection, medications, virus, in some case extreme inflammation of the gut. So you're looking at inflammatory bowel diseases that push the food through. Allergies or food sensitivities can also cause diarrhea. It really is person specific. An overactive thyroid can contribute to diarrhea, as well as over exercise. There's a thing called runner's trots that is common with endurance and marathon runners. So that can also contribute. And, it's really, diarrhea is tough, it's that loss of control. It's embarrassing. Oftentimes it's painful. Plus you're not absorbing the food that you're taking in. So if you're struggling with that, I do encourage you to reach out to Tara. You'll have an increased need for electrolytes, and she can also provide some dietary tips and maybe look at some of those root causes. I know that when you cook your food, that can actually help with absorption. For some people, a higher fat can slow things down, but it can also speed things up. So it really is person specific. And fiber. High fiber foods will help with diarrhea as well.
Mm-hmm. And so Vanessa, in your practice, what would you say is the number one cause of diarrhea? When someone comes in and says they can't control it, what do you look to first?
If it's chronic, if they're coming in, so I'm doing a full health intake. I look at medications because a lot of times like a PPI will trigger diarrhea if they've been on it for too long, a proton pump inhibitor, and nervous system and bacterial imbalances.
Interesting. I thought you would go to food triggers first.
No.
Cool.
No, those are the, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so even as we're talking, I hope you're getting a sense that digestion is complex. And so there's no one reason or one cause. And two people coming in with diarrhea, chances are their treatment plan would be very different. So we're really, it's an individualized approach to really tease out all the variables and contributing factors. So moving into bloating, this can go hand in hand with constipation and diarrhea. And just some very broad strokes of things I'm looking at when it comes to bloating is, starting from chewing and time taken or the environment at which you're eating, the environment you're eating in. So are you sitting down? Are you chewing? Are you relaxed in a parasympathetic state? And then another really important thing I look at is patterns. Which foods are causing bloating? Which types of food? And so there's different categories of food that will contribute or tell us about the cause of your bloating. So one major thing that we see a lot in our practices is fermentation and FODMAPs. So this would be a more specific form of IBS. So IBS really stands for irritable bowel syndrome. So, okay, your bowel's irritated, and then we want to look further. And so I find looking at FODMAPs and fermentation can be a more specific way of explaining irritable bowel. And so categories that I mentioned might be if you are highly sensitive to garlic and onions or beans or certain grains, then those are highly fermentable foods. And basically what's happening is you're eating them and your body is creating gas. It's like you're making beer in your digestive system or kombucha. And so the bloating is really caused by bacteria feeding off of those foods and then producing gases that are causing your uncomfortable symptoms and bloating. So we often put people on a low FODMAP diet, and we do that for a short period of time. And if you have significantly less bloating, then it really highlights to us that there's a bacterial imbalance happening, and then we want to investigate further, which with certain testing that we'll talk about. And Vanessa, do you have anything to add to bloating specifically?
No. It's really as person specific. You need to look at their food journal and understand what they're eating, when they're eating, under the circumstances, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then reflux, we've touched on this a little bit. My main thing I like for people to know is it's not always high stomach acid that's causing your symptoms. Oftentimes, more often than not, it's a sphincter issue and a low stomach acid issue. So I think it's really important to seek holistic care when it comes to reflux-based symptoms, because we want to support your optimal digestion. We don't want to go against and take over for your digestive system. So those are 4 getting examples of how we would get specific for common things we see. And tip number 4 furthers that thought of getting just personalized care and a systematic approach. And so Vanessa, can you really delve into the nutritional aspect here?
Sure. So as I said earlier, when people come in with digestive issues, looking at the food journal is really important. That gives a lot of information, and stress levels too, because stress dramatically impacts digestion. And so water and fiber first are usually my first steps. Make sure that you're drinking enough to replace, and because sometimes acid reflux can actually is a symptom of dehydration as well, because your stomach is not as an important organ as in comparison, say, for your brain, lung, heart. Water is involved with thousands of different reactions throughout the body. So water is really its own food group. So water and fiber, see how that helps. Looking for potential triggers for digestive inflammation. Now, there is potentially a really long list of things that can trigger inflammation in the gut and really kind of impact your digestive health. And it really is person specific. Rather than having people avoid a long list of foods, I want to make sure that they're also adding in key nutrients as well. So maybe they're simply not getting enough of water, for example, or not enough fiber, or not enough bulk, or, so that's where that intake and understanding the whole person really comes in handy.
And again, sorry if I can just interject, I think it's really about patterns, that we are really trained to tease out those patterns. And I find clients are often surprised by our line of questioning, that they'll say one thing and that leads us down a path that we know it's just obvious, and they think, oh yeah, I get that too, and it's us holistic care providers being able to identify the patterns.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the things too is when people come in, like when people come to me and they've been eating like a standard American diet, or they've got, symptoms of hormonal imbalances, PMS, skin, gas, bloating, like the first step diet wise is simply to try an anti-inflammatory approach, right? So removing some of those processed foods, high in sugar, balancing your blood sugar, and that goes a long way to supporting your overall digestion. In cases where there's IBS or persistent heartburn, as Tara mentioned, the FODMAPs diet is one of my go-to diets also, to test to see if there's bacterial imbalances. And oftentimes people feel incredible after only just a couple of weeks. So again,
even a couple of days, I find it's like one of the only strategies that you can see immediate results.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then when you have an actual inflammatory bowel disease, you do need to be more strategic. A paleo diet or AIP, which is the autoimmune protocol, may be a better fit depending on the severity in your situation. There was a study that came out this spring on the autoimmune protocol, and they looked at Crohn's patients. They were followed medically, and they discovered so they did AIP for 12 weeks. And then I think at the 16-week mark, they went in and they tested, and it actually changed the DNA in the intestines. Wow. So that is just food is incredibly powerful in terms of restoring balance to your digestive system. Mm-hmm. Tara's going to talk to you a little bit about testing, but if there's yeast or parasitic overgrowth, then you need a special approach for that. Testing is really important to figure out where you need to go if you're stuck, if a general anti-inflammatory diet doesn't work for you. That's where Tara can really help you up level and be strategic with your approach.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing to touch on here with the just personalized care is understanding micronutrients and macronutrients. So micronutrients would be vitamins and minerals, and we really want to eat the most micronutrient rich food possible. And oftentimes people come in, and I get this all the time, oh, I eat my protein, carb, and vegetable, right? The standard vegetable, chicken or whatever protein, and a grain. And so the macronutrients would be protein, carb, and fat. And micronutrient would be within those protein, carb, and fat. So we want to make sure that the foods that you're eating, you're choosing the most micronutrient dense option. So avocado would be super micronutrient dense as a healthy fat, and vegetable or fruit. It's a fruit, right? Avocado, I believe.
It is fruit, yeah.
Yeah. So just speaking to the importance of, yes, go protein, carb, and fat, and have the best percentage wise of that. And we don't want people really focused on percentages, but when you're choosing your diet, make sure you're choosing the most micronutrient rich food source of that category. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. That's a lot of my counsel with autoimmune is getting them to develop and switch their eating patterns to nutrient density. Again, it's not so much about what you avoid, it's about what you're putting onto your plate. And just if anybody here is having issues with protein, I know a lot of people say, I can't digest steak, I can't, it hurts my stomach. Fish is one of the top recommendations for not only immune system, but also your digestive system too, because the protein structure is a little different. It's easier to break down. And then you also get the benefit of the omega-3s that are there, which are great for skin health and brain health and inflammation. And it's high in selenium, which is also great for your immune function too. So
yeah, and also optimizing your stomach acid there to help break down the tougher to digest proteins. It's a sign for us when people say protein or odorous stools. Yeah. And you would love watching my daughter eat fish, Vanessa. She just plows the salmon in.
Does she? That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to our last tip, number 5, appropriate testing. And so we always look at blood work, and inflammation or an inflammatory marker is key, so CRP. We love to look at nutrient factors like B12, ferritin. I always want to see thyroid because that does tell us further about digestive health and metabolism. And so those are a few key markers that we would recommend on blood work. Food sensitivity testing is controversial. There's times when it would be indicated and when it wouldn't be. And so speaking with one of us to understand if it's the right test for you, because testing can be costly and it's not always the best test to do. I do really love the FODMAP challenge, which is there's no cost involved in it other than buying food. And so that can give us so much information. And if you have a positive response to the FODMAP challenge, then we would recommend SIBO testing, which stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I'm also a big fan of GI map testing, which really, as the name says, maps out your gut. And we look at digestive markers. We can see if you're gluten sensitive from that test. We look at parasites, fungus, opportunistic bacteria, H. pylori, pathogenic bacteria. So it's really a comprehensive test. And then I also threw in hormone testing here because I think that's important for people to know their baseline hormone results, and that can actually give insights into your digestive health. Digestion and hormone health go hand in hand. Absolutely. And then there is other testing that comes up, like heavy metals and liver function. So there's, really no one test per person. In a perfect world, it'd be great to do all the testing, but we really want to hone in on what's most important for each person.
Yeah.
And I know that Vanessa has to go. How are we doing here?
I need to step out at this point because I need a couple of minutes to prepare for
no problem. So we'll say goodbye to you now.
Yeah, goodbye everyone.
Okay, thanks Vanessa.
Answer the questions. Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye. Okay, so just to continue on some key questions that we received. One, is there any benefit or harm to the occasional use of Metamucil or Restorelax? So I'd actually strongly discourage people from using Restorelax. There's so many stories that you hear about Restorelax, and previously I would have thought it's okay to use acutely and short term, but I've just been privy to some really detrimental effects of it, and I would really encourage using other methods before Restorelax. And speaking to a medical professional. And then Metamucil, yeah, it's a great fiber. There's so many ways to get fiber, so I'm not averse to Metamucil. So this is a great question. How often should you poop? And this person who asked this, sometimes it will be 5 days between. So that's certainly too long to go. So I would recommend you know, the ideal would be to have 1 to 2 bowel movements per day. And if you're not having that, then it would be important to investigate that further. In terms of frequency and volume, I mean, I think people have a sense here about what's too much and what's too little. And so if you have any concerns of you're unsure if you are going enough, or if it's a productive enough stool, sorry to use that, well, I'm not sorry for that wording, but then just let's speak about your specific frequency and volume. If you don't have a bowel movement every day, does that mean constipation? Yes, that would be. Also, that would be constipation. Also, if you have dry, hard stools, that is another sign of constipation. So this person has been on a gluten-free diet for about 6 months after gluten intolerance diagnosis, but they are still getting occasional bloating and sensitivities. Here's where I would say it's not just about gluten. And sometimes when people say, oh, I've removed gluten and I didn't see any benefit, or I've removed dairy and I didn't see benefit, it's never one food group. And so really taking that totality, the whole picture is important. So if you're having bloating, or if you're noticing sensitivity symptoms are still present, then looking at some of the things we talked about in terms of bloating, so FODMAPs or chewing habits or environment of what you're eating, or digestive enzymes. And then in terms of sensitivities, just as I said, again, it's not one food, it's usually patterns and categories and different aspects of those categories. So the next question is, I have a toddler that deals with occasional constipation. We feed her pretty well, balanced diet, and try to add more fiber, veggies, etc. Wonder if you have any tips. I feel so. I go through this as well with a toddler, and I think as the digestive system is growing, there's going to be periods where, you know, we're working on optimizing the digestive enzymes and encouraging them. And so sometimes it's just a case of waiting it out and encouraging optimal digestion by helping break down the foods before giving it to the child, so it's easier to digest. It is about adding in the fiber and making sure there's enough water. I find that's one key issue with my daughter. It was in the past hard to get enough water into her. But it improves over time as they grow. And so just always have that intent of improving optimal digestion, and that's where you will start to see benefit. I have IBS, and sometimes my bowel movements are frequent and small pieces of stool resembling rabbit poop. What can I do to improve my bowel movements? So there's automatically I would say adding more bulking agents would help. So there's different types of fiber to add, and you want to make sure you're adding the bulking fiber, which can pull in the water and really build a more substantial stool, and that will move through your digestive system better as well. I would certainly look at what foods you are eating, and so there might be some triggers in the foods that you're eating. Maybe you're not getting enough of one thing or too much of another. Hydration really comes into this as well. So really looking at stress response, if you're absorbing the water, those would be some key questions to address. And then the last question, how much apple cider vinegar would you take? So we recommend apple cider vinegar as an easy way to improve stomach acidity as a first line attempt. There's other things as well. So we have specific agents that strengthen the sphincter. And then just as a simple test to start with, if someone is getting reflux, is having apple cider vinegar about a tablespoon in a small amount of water going into your stomach, that will signal the upper sphincter to tighten while you're also getting the acidity into the stomach to help break down the food. So if someone's intolerant to, or they don't like the taste of the actual vinegar, then I would recommend pill. I just think it's easiest to take the liquid. So that wraps up our conversation today and Poop Camp. There's so much to cover here, and it really is worth an individual conversation. So reach out to us. You can reach us at this contact information. So Higher Health Center is my office, and Vanessa Bond has a lot of amazing programs that she does, so Bond with Health. And follow us both on Instagram. We love having this conversation, and send us an email through our website, and we want to keep this conversation going. Thank you for listening, and here's to healthy poop.